Welcome to the Radiant Visalia podcast. Join us at one of our two services, 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. Download the Church Center app or visit our website, radiantvisalia.com, to stay connected with us. All right, enjoy.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find.
During this holiday season, we have a bit of a fight, and that fight is to remember what it's all about. Am I right? Sometimes it can be a struggle, not just this holiday, but every holiday, but especially this holiday. We just get so busy. We find ourselves like singing about the nearness of God and then not experiencing His nearness, like we're celebrating that He's come close and you feel far away. Anybody ever experienced that during the holidays? And really quickly, we can detach what we're doing from the bigger context of what it's all about. Really quickly, Christmas can become about things that are actually quite small, and we can forget or we can drift from the bigger context of the holiday. And it's not just this holiday. The Shaws are moving here from England to come on staff, and so the Shaws asked me to please send a video to them explaining Thanksgiving, because they don't celebrate it. So, because they've got daughters, they asked that my daughters would explain the Thanksgiving holiday. So I walked around and asked my kids what Thanksgiving was about. And I was nervous for a lot of reasons, because it's a reflection of me as a parent, for sure. First, I was nervous that they were going to say something derogatory about the English. And then I got over that real quick. And, and it started with turkey, and it started with some of the things that we do. And then eventually it got to really the bigger story behind Thanksgiving. And, I don't know about, and it's not just Thanksgiving or Christmas. Like, can you imagine, like, bumping into St. Patrick and being like, we have a holiday, we honor you. A day, oh really? What's that? Oh, that's amazing. Tell me about that day. Did you guys spend your day praying for pagans to get converted? No, we drink green beer all day, Really? Yeah, that's what we do to celebrate you, man. And then we pinch people. we get drunk and we pinch people, I can imagine him just looking at us like, what? Well, if they don't have green, we pinch them, and I can just imagine him going, how? Like, how did my life lead you to do this, But things drift really quick. There's a bit of a fight to remember what it's all about and to not let it become about these small, insignificant, meaningless things. The Christmas season is not about decorations. It's not about gifts. It's not about being busy, even though it feels like it is. And we're constantly fighting. And if you're anything like me, you go downstream real quick. Because it's not just that our holidays have a problem. Our holidays have a problem because we have a problem. We drift rather quick. How many of you have gone to a wedding before and you watched this couple very much in love, renewing their vows, and you there, in attendance, you're stirred and you're like, I remember my vows and I'm going to love my wife like this, and there's like this revelation of what it's all about, and then it only lasts about 10 minutes into the car ride home, and you've forgotten about your commitment, your vow to live out your vows. I know that's been the case at funerals too, where I'll go to a funeral, and at that funeral, I'll be thinking, man, this is what it's all about, and this is how I want to be remembered, and this is what's important, and this is what isn't important. And I'm getting it. I got the big picture. I got the perspective. These things are going to mean something in the end, and these things are not going to mean anything in the end. I'd like to spend more time thinking and doing something about these things, and I'd like to avoid these minors. I'm no longer going to major on these things. And that lasts how long? Someone's death can't get us sometimes to go a day to remember the big picture, the big context that we're a part of. That when our lives And when our holidays get removed from the big story, the big context of why we're here, they become small. They become really insignificant. They become actually void of any meaning or purpose. We become very self-centered. That's a drift. And it's always very disappointing when God reminds me that I'm not at the center of it all. Anybody go through that disappointment over and over again? What? Again? Yeah, you're not at the center of it all. That's disappointing. It's a bit of a drift for us. So this morning's a gift because we get to come, we get to remember like what it's actually about. And we get to remind ourselves. I don't know if your week's been anything like my week, but I've drifted. And then this morning's a gift because we're going to read Daniel chapter 7, which is all about the big picture. So we don't detach this from its bigger context, this Christian life, this following Jesus thing, that we don't detach it from its bigger context. It makes it very personal, very individual, and miss what God is doing on a cosmic scale. Miss the big picture and how we fit into it. Today marks a transition for us. The first 6 chapters of Daniel are all about things that happened to Daniel and his buddies. They're stories from Babylon. And today we start talking about the visions of Daniel. So chapter 7 through 12 are the visions of Daniel. Last week was Daniel chapter 6, which was about the lion's den. Daniel was in danger because he was in the lion's den. And this week I am in danger because I'm talking about the end times. The big thrust of the book, if you've not been with us, but the big thrust is we've been talking about how is it that we maintain faithfulness when we're in exile, when we're the minority, when we're foreigners, living in a foreign place. How do we remain faithful? How do we be godly in a really godless place? And that's been the thrust, right? Maintain faithfulness. Maintain faithfulness. And I know I've been encouraged to do that. Hopefully you have too. Maintain faithfulness. Stand your ground. Stand your ground. But you don't just need to maintain faithfulness in exile. You need to maintain hope. Why stand my ground? What does it look like to maintain hope? And the book of Daniel has something to say about that. In fact, I think Daniel 7's all about that. Maintaining hope when we're the minority. You don't just need to hold your ground. You need hope. You need hope you can stand on when you're the minority, when things don't seem to be going your way, when oppressive kings continue to oppress and you can't find the King of Kings on the scene. What do? How do we maintain hope? Because that's what this is about. We claim, if you're here and you're a Christian, we claim that Jesus is ruling and reigning, that all power and all dominion has been given to him, that he's king over all, that he's sovereign over the universe. We say these things so quickly, but it can be hard to find evidence of that when we look around. I know when I drive to work, I drive down Santa Fe, and the things that I pass get me thinking, if you're ruling it all, then why don't you do something about it all? If you're over this, then please do something about this. If you're over this, are you there and do you care about what's happening here? And that's just here. Any glimpse of what's going on across the globe can get you to question. If you're over it all, if you're ruling, then please do something. The author of Hebrews said it this way: when God put everything under his Son's control, nothing was left out. That means it's not a good answer to say, well, there's some things that he's sovereign over, like Sundays from 10 to 12. But Sunday from 12 to 2, when you're at lunch getting in an argument, well, that's outside his control, so that's why that's happening. No. When he put things under his control, it all got put under his control. Nothing was left out. However, at the present time, we still don't see everything under his Son's control. However, at this present time, we still don't see everything under his Son's control. So how do we maintain hope? How do we maintain this idea that the kings of the earth will one day be judged by the King of Kings? That they will be accountable for what they've done and said in this life? How do we maintain that? Welcome to Daniel chapter 7. I will warn you before I read Daniel chapter 7 that this is a dream. And it's weird. It just is. And two things I would remind you of. Your dreams are really weird too. Remind you of that. If you had to get up here and share yours, we'd all be going, that's bizarre. Probably wouldn't have said that out loud. I also just want to remind you how amazingly out of the box our God is. We come here and we know how it's going to go. You know, if you've heard one worship song, you've heard them all. There's that one bridge that builds and then it cuts out. And just with the voices, we sing that chorus again. It all becomes a little bit predictable. Until you get to chapters like Daniel chapter 7. And then it blows your mind. Here we go. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. And then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And then as I looked, its wings were plucked off. And it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear, was raised up on one side. Most people think that means that he was standing on his hind legs. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke into pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, he can't even catch up. You ever had that dream where you're wondering in your dream what your dream is about? So he's looking at the horns going, that's interesting. While that's happening, behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Doing all right? What are all those horns? Ooh, another horn. This horn has eyes and a mouth. It's boasting. This is weird. This is all funny until we see this stuff play out. Enjoy it while you can. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. This must have been so comforting for Daniel to be in such a big crowd. If you've been here for the last few weeks, you know that most of the time he was standing alone, isolated. And how comforting it must have been to consider this cloud of witnesses, that now he's just one of the many. He's not the only one standing. He's one amongst many. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So this is a courtroom. That's the scene here. I looked then because the sound of the great words that the horn, I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So one like the Son of Man is given a kingdom by the Ancient of Days. The Ancient of Days judges the beast, gives a kingdom to one like the Son of Man. This kingdom is glorious, this kingdom is universal, and this kingdom is eternal. Daniel's vision gets interpreted. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. Now, Daniel is a pro-dream interpreter. In fact, he's made quite a name for himself interpreting dreams. And again, how comforting it must have been that he was just one amongst many, and then he didn't have to have the answer. He just got to walk up to someone and say, "What's going on here? I'm usually the guy with answers, but I've got some questions." So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. Then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke into pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell. The horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. And as I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, "As for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms. It shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it into pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart." I don't think it was actually the vision that disturbed Daniel. I think it was the news that this was going to take a long time. He had been waiting for the kingdom to come and for the King of Kings to be enthroned. And I think the news that he received that day got him thinking, this is going to take longer than I thought, which is always the issue in our suffering and pain. If you're in exile, it's not about the intensity of the pain that you're in at the moment. The question is, how long will I be in this? When will it change? When will things shift? And of course, that's the place where he's working for these kings. He's working a government job going, how long? How long will I be stuck in this job working for these oppressive rulers? And then he gets news that there's these 4 kings that will rise, and each one of them represents a kingdom, and he's thinking, dang it, I'm not getting out of this as soon as I thought. So we're going to break this passage into 3 sections, the first being the jungle, the second being the Ancient of Days, or the greatness of God seen in the Ancient of Days, and then the third being the goodness of God seen in the Son of Man. Because that's what you need when you're in a time of suffering, when you're in exile, when you feel like a minority, when you're asking the question, how long? You need a revelation of the greatness of God, but not just his force. You need to know that he's also a friend, and you need a revelation of the goodness of God. Not just that he's powerful, but that he's kind, that he has you in mind. And I believe that this is a revelation. And it's not primarily about the Antichrist. It's primarily about the Christ. It's about the greatness of God as seen in the Ancient of Days and the goodness of God seen in the Son of Man. So welcome to the jungle. The first thing that Daniel sees is 4 beasts, and these beasts are pretty bizarre. And we come to find out through the interpretation that these beasts represent kings and kingdoms. And that's not a huge stretch for us, is it? Because when we think of the eagle, we know that that's our bird, right? Benjamin Franklin, he wanted it to be the turkey. Everyone's like, we can't do a turkey. That's pathetic. It's something, it'd be so cool if it was the turkey, actually. Russia was known as the bear, right? When we think of bulldogs, we think of Fresno State. So it's not uncommon for countries to have something of a mascot or a symbol or an animal that they're known as or by. For a Jew whose imagination was shaped by the Scriptures, for a Jew who was getting their information from the Psalms and the prophets, it would have been much easier for them to read these passages. In fact, I think some of this stuff is just stock imagery. You might be reading it and going, what the heck? But I don't think that's what was going on for Daniel or for the Jewish people as they found inspiration from this passage. When the prophets tried to describe a violent, oppressive, aggressive empire that was coming to crush them, they used beasts. In Isaiah 5, this is how he describes Babylon coming to town. And it's different than Santa Claus coming to town. When Babylon comes to town, in Isaiah 5, it says, their roar is like that of a lion. They roar like young lions, not like the sad old one, but like the young one, not like the one at the zoo who's just been pent up for so long. Their roar is like that of a lion. They roar like young lions. They growl as they seize their prey and carry it off with no one to rescue. In that day, when they come to town, they will roar over it like the roaring of the sea. So for Isaiah, the best thing to compare Babylon to was a pride of lions who devoured and hauled off their prey to where no one could rescue them. And that's exactly what Daniel experienced. The other thing that keeps being talked about here in this passage is horns. Not just beasts representing kings and kingdoms, but there's this horns constantly coming up. And by horn, we're not talking about, trumpet. David McAllister played trumpet last week, and that's great. And that's what usually comes to mind for us when we think of horns. But again, this is stock imagery for somebody whose imagination has been shaped by the prophets and the Psalms. And not, I don't think this one's a stretch either, because I tell my kids when you mess with the bull, you get the horns. And I don't mean trumpet. I mean power and strength. And that's what horns were symbolic of. Power and strength. Psalm 75. We praise you, God. We praise you for your name is near. People tell of your wonderful deeds. You say, I choose the appointed time. It is I who judge with equity. When the earth and all its people quake, it is I who holds the pillars firm. To the arrogant, I say, boast no more. And to the wicked, do not lift up your horns. Do not lift your horns against heaven. Do not speak so defiantly. I will, says the Lord, cut off the horns of all the wicked, but the horns of the righteous will be lifted up. So for them, as they're reading about beasts and horns, again, I believe that this is kind of stock imagery. They probably know what's being talked about here, and I don't think it's a big stretch for us. However, lions with eagles' wings, where the wings are plucked off and then they're stood up, well, this is a little bit different. So there's 4 kings and 4 kingdoms represented by these 4 beasts. The first is a lion with eagle wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. This is the Babylonian Empire. This is actually a symbol that you can still find in modern-day Iraq. In fact, when you went to Babylon, you walked past this image. On the city gates was a lion with eagle's wings and a human's face. That same image found in Nebuchadnezzar's palace. This is no doubt Babylon. This beast represents the Babylonian Empire. The second is a bear. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, devour much flesh. This is a representation of the Persian Empire, which in Daniel's lifetime would take over power. The Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire, they didn't just conquer the Babylonians. They conquered Egypt and Libya as well. And the picture of a bear that's got ribs in its mouth, like it's already devoured something and it's still hungry for more, is the idea that Persia conquered Babylon but wasn't content with that. They had already crushed Babylon, but they were hungry for more. And so they took it to Egypt and Libya as well. The third beast, which is my favorite beast, is the leopard with wings. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Most scholars believe that this is a reference to the Greeks. That this is a reference to how speedy Alexander the Great was. In just over a decade, he dominated the known world. He was 25 when he conquered Persia. His lust for power was legendary, and he did it really, really quickly. And that's why they believe this leopard with the wings of a bird represents Alexander the Great in the Greek Empire. What's interesting is Alexander the Great didn't have an heir, and so he gave his kingdom to 4 generals. And so that's why they think this leopard has 4 heads on it. The last beast is the super beast, the mega beast. It has 5 times the horn strength. That's what this 10 horns is about. 5 times the strength. It had iron teeth. It devoured and broke into pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts that were before it. This is a reference to Rome and their alliances, which would be the most vicious of ancient rulers over Israel. They were the worst, hands down. And then, of course, there is the little horn with eyes and a mouth, making a boasting and saying things about the Almighty. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. In the interpretation in verse 25 we read, he speaks words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Now, if you're new to church, you might not know this, but if you've been in the game for a little while, you know that there's a little bit of debate about this little horn. Some people think that it refers to a person that we have not seen yet, that this passage refers to an antichrist that we've actually not seen just yet, that he's yet to come on the scene. And then some people think this refers to Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a Roman allied ruler over Syria, and he tried to annihilate the Jews and the Jewish religion by forcing them. He tried to change the laws, and he forced them to worship Zeus. This was unprecedented persecution under his rule. To read the accounts of what he did to the Jewish people in their temple is disgusting. He was a sick, sick man. So I spent a fair amount of time reading this week, trying to figure out, is this little horn Antiochus Epiphanes, or is this someone we have not seen yet? Does this refer to someone in the flesh and blood that we've already seen, or does it refer to someone who is to come? And I think the answer is yes. I do. Because not just because I'm trying to cop out, because it's easier to say that. But I think that prophecy, and that's what this dream is not just a dream, this dream is a prophecy. And prophecy usually works on 2 levels. It is speaking to something in the flesh and blood that's immediately in front of the people. And then it's pointing to future beyond that. That it will unfold initially, and then something else will unfold eventually. That it's a sign pointing to something initial, but then it's also pointing beyond that to something eventual. That's how prophecy works in the Old Testament. That's why there's speculation about it. These guys, this is 600 years before Jesus Christ. 600 years before Jesus Christ. And Daniel is looking into the future like we would be looking at these mountains. And we say the mountains are this way. We can see their peaks. We can see the hills. But sometimes you don't know that those foothills are 100 miles from those peaks. All you can see is the mountains, and so you keep describing the mountains. But once you get in those mountains, you understand that there's distance between those foothills and the peaks that you see. And for the Old Testament prophets, they're saying mountains. We see mountains. We see something on the rise. We see something coming. But sometimes they can't offer us the detail that we sometimes crave. No doubt, this passage is about 4 flesh and blood empires. No doubt. This is about Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. No doubt it's about that. But at the same time, it's about every empire down through the ages that's acted beastly. And there's been more than 4. It's maybe 6. This is about the kingdoms of this world versus the kingdom of our God. And this showdown will go down more than once. It'll be a constant struggle that we're in, not just one time. Well, the kingdom of God against the kingdom of this world. No, right now, the kingdom of our God and King versus the kingdoms or the empires of this world. It's a constant struggle. Whatever the identity of this little horn, and honestly, I could go either way. Whatever the identity of this little horn is, I think what's important is that we not focus on its identity, but we focus on its destiny. It will be destroyed. We know that for sure. We don't know who it is for sure, but we know its destiny for sure. That what opposes the Ancient of Days is destroyed. That our God will judge the kings of this earth. So don't miss the point here on me. This dream is pretty complex, no doubt. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. But the message is really simple. The message is really simple. God is in control of who's in control. It's the same message we've been hearing all throughout the book of Daniel. Despite appearances, God is in control. The Ancient of Days, the King of Kings, will judge the kings of this earth. And that was good news to Daniel because he was in the middle of it going, how long? How long am I going to have to deal with this crap? Don't worry, it's coming. Another thing I want you to consider is that the original audience who got Daniel chapter 7 and was inspired by Daniel chapter 7 had no idea how these details would work themselves out, and they were still inspired and strengthened by this passage. This was still useful to them, and they had no way of knowing the details. What they knew when they came away with this from this passage is that God is seated, and He rules and He reigns, and these kings and their kingdoms will be held accountable. They had no idea of knowing, well, that's probably, going to be Rome, and, that's probably going to be the European Union prior to the Brexit, because the Brexit took it from 10 to 9, and we needed it to be 10. They don't know the details. They would have had no way of looking at the details, yet they were encouraged by this passage. So don't miss the point. It could be possible as we read this to work out the details of the prophecy and then miss what God's saying. It'd be possible to work this out because this isn't just about God revealing future events. This is about God revealing Himself. The curtain parts and we don't get a glimpse into the future. The curtain parts and we get a glimpse of the glory of God, the greatness of the Ancient of Days, and the goodness of the Son of Man. So don't miss the point. Listen, if God wanted us to know the details about future historical events, He wouldn't have given him this weird old dream. He would have just said, this is what's going to happen. But instead, it's this incredible, complex, curious, sense-appealing revelation with a ton of mystery in it. Listen, He's trying to capture Daniel's imagination. God's trying to capture the imagination of His people. This is not just about future events. This is about God revealing Himself and again capturing His people so that they would lift up their eyes. Lift up your eyes. I'm the giver of life. This is what God's saying, announcing over His people. Why so much symbolism if He was trying to clearly lay out the facts or if the details were the point of this passage? They're not. The curtain parts, and we see the wizard. There's somebody over Oz. The greatness of our God, seen in the Ancient of Days. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took His seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of His head pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before Him. 1,000 thousands served Him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before Him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. The Ancient of Days, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's the name of an album, or at least a song on an album. The Ancient of Days, the Eternal One. What's being said here is that kings and kingdoms are going to pass away. These successive kings and successive kingdoms are going to pass away, but the Ancient of Days will rule forever. And the kings of the earth will be held accountable. Can you get just a glimpse of His sovereignty? Because His sovereignty is what you need when you're in a time of suffering. When you're in a time of suffering, You need a glimpse of his sovereignty, that he's over this, that what's over your head is under his feet. That's what you need when you're in that time. Can you see the sovereignty of the Ancient of Days? This whole thing starts with Daniel seeing a picture, and he sees the four winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. We can't even make sense of this, because for the ancient Near East, the sea was a picture of chaos, of instability, of mystery, of evil. That's what the sea came to represent. And here we have the four winds of heaven stirring it up. We don't even know what to do with that. Well, is God responsible for it? How does this play out between these two things? The four winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. That even in the chaos, God is at work. Even in the trouble, God is at work. Did you notice that the beasts are dependent? They're gross. And they're completely dependent. The first was like a lion that had eagle's wings, and it was lifted up. It was lifted up. And then it was made to stand. Go ahead, stand. And then a mind was given to it. Some people think this is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar's sanity being restored. I don't know if you remember that story from Daniel 4. And then there was another beast, and then it was told, okay, you can go eat. Okay, it's time to eat. And after this I looked, and behold, another leopard, and dominion was given to it. That these beasts, no matter how gruesome, are dependent. Again, the message would have been clear. Despite appearances, God is in control. Now there's a lot of other questions that spring from that, but know that. Notice his wisdom. That's the reference here when it says that his hair was like pure wool. And we actually live in an ageist culture where we look down on age, but they actually looked up towards age. They thought they were envious of gray hair. I know this might be the most profound thing that you hear this morning. What? They weren't envious of youth, they were envious of age. And when we're looking at white hair, we're looking at wisdom. And then his righteousness, his clothing was white as snow. Empires have done all kinds of horrific things in order to possess and enforce their rule. All kinds of disgusting things in order to get a seat of power. But the Ancient of Days remains spotless in his rule. Sinclair Ferguson writes, and what are you going to do besides write commentaries if your name's Sinclair Ferguson? What else are you going to do? You're not playing baseball. You have to be a professor. Sinclair Ferguson, with elbow patches and a pipe in his mouth, he says, he has never compromised his righteous dealing in establishing his kingdom. He's spotless in the way that he's established his kingdom. Humans have. They've compromised everything in the pursuit of power. But the Ancient of Days is all-powerful, and he is righteous. There's not a spot on him. So there it is, a picture of the greatness of God, that he's seated, and he will judge, and he will rule, and we need to know that he's great. We need to know that he's a force. But sometimes we need more than that, yeah? It's like, well, that's great that you're a force. Could you force some of your goodness on me? Could I know you? That's great that you're all powerful and you sit over these kingdoms and all of human history, but can you break into history and can you touch my life? The greatness of God in the Ancient of Days, the goodness of God and the Son of Man. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. One like the Son of Man. A human one, or someone who is human-like, came on the clouds of heaven before the Ancient of Days and was given dominion over all the peoples and the nations. And it's a glorious kingdom. It's a universal kingdom. And it's an eternal kingdom. One like a human coming on the clouds. The clouds in the Old Testament, again, I'm just trying to shape your imagination because I don't know what you think of when you think of clouds. But no doubt when these Jews thought about clouds, they thought about an appearing of God. At Sinai, clouds that represented the very presence of God. The tabernacle, clouds that represented the presence of God. The people of God led by a cloud by day. The cloud was an appearing of God, God's very presence. Psalm 68, sing to God, sing in praise of his name, extol him who rides on the clouds. This is what would have informed their imagination. Rejoice before him, his name is the Lord. Psalm 104, he makes the clouds his chariot and rides on the wings of the wind. Nahum chapter 1, the Lord is slow to anger but great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. His way is in the whirlwind and the storm, and clouds are the dust of his feet. What a cool picture. When God appears, he will appear in the clouds. This is what shaped their imagination. So help me out here. Let's not skip ahead. Let's just savor Jesus Christ. One like a human. One human-like, the Son of Man. Someone who can empathize with us, who knows what we're facing, who understands what it is to be oppressed by an empire. One who's human-like, who is at the same time an appearing of God, who comes on the clouds, who receives dominion from the Ancient of Days. And his dominion is glorious. His dominion's universal and his dominion is eternal. And then his conquest means that all the saints share in his victory. That when he wins, we win. That when he goes up and he gets authority to rule, he'll rule in favor of us. Matthew 26. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and he sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus. These are all the Bible geeks. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they didn't find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, hey, this guy, he said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? Is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you're the Messiah, the Son of God. Now, we call Jesus, and our favorite name for Jesus is Jesus Christ. He never referred to himself that way. He wouldn't stop you from referring to him that way, but that wasn't what he would say about himself. Here's what he would say. The priest says, I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you're the Messiah, the Son of God. Well, you said so, says Jesus. I didn't say it, you said it. I love Jesus for these moves right here. That's it. Are you the Messiah? I don't know. You're the one who said that. I'm not real sure. Am I? But I say to all of you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priests, who are Bible geeks, we're not the first group of people to study Daniel chapter 7. They tore their clothes and said, "He's spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you've heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He's worthy of death," they answered. Listen, I don't know about Daniel chapter 7. I read hard for 1 week. I don't know. I mean, I really don't. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I think it's probably important to know. Here's what I do know. I love Jesus. I trust Jesus. I believe in Jesus. And Daniel chapter 7 shaped his identity and his ministry. 81 times he referred to himself in the Gospels as the Son of Man. 42 in the book of Matthew. It's his title. He took Daniel chapter 7 really seriously. And I know there's probably some of you here, you're like, I can't sort out these Old Testament things. This stuff's really bizarre. Listen, I believe the Old Testament because Jesus believed the Old Testament, and I believe in Jesus. This book shaped his ministry and his identity. What are you going to do with this guy, Jesus? Well, I don't know what to do with some of this stuff that I read in the Old Testament. What are you going to do with Jesus? What are you going to do with his claims? What are you going to do with what he said? This is not about an antichrist. This is about Jesus Christ, the Son of Man. What a mic drop. Long before there were mic drops. Are you the Messiah? I don't know. What do you think? You said it. I'm telling you, I'm the Son of Man. And the second that the beast destroys me is the second that I'll be ruling at the right hand of my Father. He was crucified for sins, as you know. He died the death that we deserved. He was raised to life after being trampled. And he appears to his disciples over a period of time. And then he ascends. That's what we believe as Christians, that he ascends to the Ancient of Days. And he receives power and authority. And he rules from the right hand. Then the 11 disciples, this is the story of Jesus' ascension. I want you to see it connected to Daniel chapter 7. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. I love that. Love that that's in there. Some people were like, probably not. There's some people here who are like, yeah, probably not. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." He has been handed a kingdom. It is glorious. It is universal. And it is eternal. The greatness of our God is something we need in suffering, that he's bigger than what we're facing. The goodness of God is also something we need when we're in suffering, that he's near, that he knows, that God's come down, that God's done something about it, that he's tasted the things that we taste. And this is the big picture. This is the big picture that you're a part of, that you and I both so quickly lose sight of. That all of human history is marching towards an end, and we think we're doing our own thing. We're all doing what's right in our own eyes. But we are headed somewhere, whether we like it or not. Everyone's headed somewhere. Some people are doing it on purpose. Luke 24, little side point. I just love this. 2 guys on the road to Emmaus. They're really discouraged. They're discouraged because they had hoped in Jesus, and Jesus had been crucified. And so now they're walking away from Jerusalem, which is the center of religious devotion. They're walking away, they're pouting, they're talking to themselves, they're saying, man, I thought we had this one. Man, I thought he was the one. Man, we trusted in him, we were banking on him, he's disappointed us. And a stranger walks up to them and says, hey guys, why so down? And they say, are you crazy? Have you not been around here? Have you not heard of this guy Jesus? He's crucified. What's worse is that we thought he was the one. We thought he was the Messiah. We thought he was the guy. And now he's a dead guy. And we're crushed because of it. And then this stranger, who happens to be Jesus and is concealing his identity, says to them, how foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses, Jesus marches them through the Bible and says, the point of this book is me. Can you see me here? No doubt he came to Daniel chapter 7 and said, can you see me here? And then he stood over here. Can you hear me now? And then he stood over here and he marched them through. This was a Bible study with Jesus. And then he departed, he left them, and this is what the two guys said. Did not our hearts burn within us when we got it? When we got the big picture? When we got the point to which all human history is flowing, and we got caught up in this river? When we started to drift in a different direction, did not our hearts burn? When we understood the big picture? And I'm praying, I know you're discouraged, that potentially you're facing circumstances that feel overwhelming. I want to say to you that our God is great and our God is good. And there's a big picture that our lives belong in. And when we connect with this river, our hearts are like fire. Would you stand with me? These guys had lost hope. And then they got the big picture. And they got some purpose. These guys had lost courage. And then they got the big picture. And they got courage. They were moving away from Jerusalem, from the center of religious devotion. And then they got the big point, the big picture. And they went back to Jerusalem, yelling and shouting. These guys were preoccupied by sad and fearful events. Anybody else spent the last 4 months preoccupied with sad and or fearful events? And their hearts begin to burn because they realize that their immediate circumstances are not the end. That the King of Kings will judge the kings of this earth. And that we can and will possess a kingdom that's glorious, universal, and eternal. I'm going to pray for us. Lord, we spend a lot of the week asking that you would save us from our circumstances, that you would rescue us, that you would deliver us. We spend a lot of our week praying that you would help us to make it. And I just want to pray right now that you would actually save us from our really small, pathetic view of you. You would save us, that you would deliver us from a bunch of dumb ideas about who you are. It's what we need most, God. We say it together as a church. What we need most is a big God. What we need most is a view of you that's accurate and correct. Jesus, by your Holy Spirit, I ask that you would rearrange the way people think about you, and that you would save us from really small thinking. Save us from a view of you that's not correct. Lord, you're great. You rule over human history. You set kings up, you set them down. You set kingdoms up and you set them down. And we want to see you that way. It's great. And we also want to experience your goodness and your kindness towards us. Would you come and reveal yourself to us in this season? Deliver us, God. Deliver us. Deliver us. In your Son's name. You didn't do so much, Jesus, for us to think so little of you. Help us to have you in mind, hearts that are towards you. Thank you, Son of Man. Thank you, God-man, for stepping into our situation and ruling in righteousness. Thank you for not using us as you rule, but for being righteous in what you do. We surrender to you. We're tired of the pharaohs we're serving. We're tired of the slave drivers we're serving, Lord. Deliver us. Deliver us. And everyone said, Amen.
Thanks for listening. We want to be a resource for you as you walk with Jesus. So please connect with us at radiantvisalia.com. Until next time.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find. Though I love the flowers and trees and the smell of the grinding sea and all the beautiful things here in life. And